Well, good morning, everybody. This is April 1st, April Fool's Day. I am back from spring break and bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, ready to go. We are on episode 65, the sixth investigation relating to the JFK assassination. We've gone through four of which have been investigations, government investigations, starting with the Warren Commission, uh, and then following up with the church hearings and actually Watergate in 72 to 74, then the church hearings in 75, and then House Select Committee, which we just finished in the late 70s. And then interspersed within that group of four is a fifth, which was actually a criminal trial, the Shaw trial, led by Jim Garrison down in New Orleans, the only criminal trial in these six investigations that we're looking at. Today, we're going to be looking at a civil trial that yields a fantastic story that we just don't hear very much about, which is why I asked the question, why haven't we heard of Marita Lorenz? I didn't hear about Marita Lorenz and her role in all of this until I'd been researching JFK and Watergate for several years. And a lot of people didn't give her a lot of credence, but the more you study Marita Lorenz, she's right smack in the middle of all these goings on related to Cuba, related to Castro, related to JFK, involving people like Bill Harvey and E. Howard Hunt, Frank Sturgis, all of the major players. I save her story for this particular point chronologically and topically because if there's a lot of impact in her story, and I want it to be of maximum value, and it wouldn't be of maximum value if you didn't already know or have been introduced to all of these players. If this was your first introduction to them, you wouldn't have near the impact. So you've heard of all these guys. You've heard of E. Howard Hunt and Frank Sturgis. You've heard of Jack Ruby. You've heard of obviously Fidel Castro, and you've heard of Bill Harvey and all these people. So who is Marita Lorenz and why haven't we heard of her? This is a picture of her as a young woman. Top right, she was considered to be a very beautiful looker. So that's the word that was used to describe her. And there she is. There's two pictures of her. One on the left, as she's standing on the coast of Cuba. We'll talk about how she got to Cuba. There on the right, she is giving Fidel Castro a kiss. She's become his mistress by this point. And the envy of all these other ladies you can see in the background. Castro was, they say power is the greatest aphrodisiac, and Castro understood that. Bottom picture, kind of a collage of different views, different portraits of Marita Lorenz. The middle one is of her and Castro together. The one on the far right is the one that's been kind of spliced in there. Just an assortment of pictures. The top picture here is an article, a very famous article that came out in a newspaper story, actually a news article story in a magazine about the spy who loved Castro and Marita Lorenz's relationship with Castro, her story subsequent to her relationship with Castro, and how it impacts American history. That story was sort of the introduction to the American people of this person named Marita Lorenz. Bottom picture, another picture of Lorenz and Castro together. This is a little bit later. This is actually in a meeting that she is been sent by the CIA to assassinate him and fails in that mission. So this is the sixth investigation, the last one that we will be looking at with respect to JFK, before we move into the conspiracy and conspirators part of the series. So this is investigation number 6, and it all starts with a story, and the story is contained within August 16th, 1978. So this is right towards the tail end of the House Select Committee and all the goings on related to that. The Spotlight, which is a very conservative, some might argue a right-wing, kind of a far right, maybe even extremist weekly newspaper that was published by Liberty Lobby. And it was written before the House Select Committee published its report, and it's a prediction. And in this story, they predict that the House Select Committee was going to establish that ex-CIA officer E. Howard Hunt was involved in the conspiracy to kill JFK. All right, so they name a name. And the House Select Committee comes out with its report, and it does not name E. Howard Hunt in that way or in that manner. And so in 81, Hunt sues Liberty Lobby for defamation and wins a $650,000 settlement. And it appears that that's the end of it. 4 years later, Liberty Lobby appealed. The question is, okay, well, what took them 4 years? If they believed so strongly in their story and the sources of that story, why did they wait 4 years to appeal? And the answer to that question is they were looking for a star witness who could corroborate the story. Evidently, they felt like the evidence, since they had already lost the original trial, they needed more evidence to support their conclusion. And it came in the form of Marita Lorenz, who by 1985, the Liberty Lobby legal team had found her, listened to her story, and determined that now they could go forward with the appeal. And you'll see why soon. Just a broad strokes version of Marita Lorenz's story. Allegedly, she was the former mistress of Fidel Castro, which this relationship began in 1959. And then allegedly, according to her story, she was recruited by the CIA in 1960 to assassinate him. If that's all you know, it sounds incredible, unbelievable. It sounds beyond the pale. It sounds a little bit like an exaggeration, or someone's been reading too many spy novels. How do you go from the mistress of Fidel Castro in 1959, 1 year later being hired by the CIA to assassinate him? Especially when we've already discovered that it's nearly impossible to assassinate Castro, though we've tried very, very many times. You can't get close to him. He's got spies everywhere, including in our own country, in Miami specifically. He's got this security team led by Fabian Escalante that is wise to everything. They move him around. He's in different houses every night. He's got body doubles everywhere on the island. It's just next to impossible to assassinate this guy. And furthermore, if you are close to him and he suspects you, you're going to disappear. So how is this young girl in 1959, his mistress? That's understandable. But how is it a year later she's hired by the CIA to assassinate him? How in the world would they expect her to carry something like that off when all of their assets couldn't do it? All right. So she becomes this star witness for Liberty Lobby. And basically, again, the broad strokes, her testimony was: one, she was an employee of the CIA. Two, she was recruited by Frank Sturgis into that assassination program, to an assassination program. She was recruited into the CIA and into a special assassination program by Frank Sturgis, whom we've already been introduced to, who is, without any doubt, a CIA assassin. He's described himself that way, and he is a CIA employee, an asset. Third, she says that she witnessed Sturgis receive payments for his CIA work from E. Howard Hunt. So that's going to be her connection to this case, because of course this case is all about E. Howard Hunt. And then fourthly, she says that she, Sturgis, and Hunt were all CIA members of Operation 40, which, if you've been following this series, we talked a lot about Operation 40. That was the operation that predated Operation Mongoose. And it was the effort to overthrow Castro's government and to leave no traces of U.S. involvement in such an operation. It involved things like crop burnings, sabotage, up to and including assassination. So she is maintaining that all three of these, herself included, were CIA members and members of Operation 40. All right, so let's look into the bio of Marita Lorenz. I'm going to have to find a place here for my, there we go. She's not American. She was born in Germany to an American mother, and who was an actress and had become a spy for Britain and France. So the espionage game is something she's familiar with through her mother. Her German father was a ship captain, and she's going to be very involved in his line of work, which is how she eventually meets Castro. A little bit of a tragic story. During World War II and in the lead up to World War II, her family was actually sent to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp because her mother and her father were known anti-Nazis. And so when she was only 5 years old, the entire family was sent to Bergen-Belsen. She's one of the few, she and her family, were one of the few to survive the concentration camp experience, being freed from Bergen-Belsen by the British near the end of the war. So she has that experience, which makes her unique immediately from a lot of people. The fact that she was born into a mixed family of, at least as far as back their nationalities are concerned. She's got an American mother and a German father, and then they spend a good chunk of her early childhood in a concentration camp, and then they survive that concentration camp, which is an interesting story in and of itself. After the war, the family moved to America in 1950. So here are some, this has become a pretty common story now. Pictured top left is that same news article that I introduced to you at the opening slide. On the top right, that is an autobiographical story by Marita, telling the story that I'm fixing to tell you. The Observer, the bottom left, published a book called Marita, and with her involvement in, and then you see there another version, that book that she authored, The Spy Who Loved Castro, has been published and republished. There's been several editions of it. Anyway, those are the book covers. So in 1959, 9 years later, so they come to America in 1950, and 9 years later, she's with her father on one of his ships. This was pretty common. She said that that was her job. Her dad used her on as she was kind of raised on those ships, and she helped her father. And so in 1959, one of her father's ships traveled to Cuba, to Havana, and she was 19 years old at this time. So you figure, she's already seen quite a bit of history. 1940, when she was born, Europe was already at war. And 5 years into that, she's in a concentration camp. And you figure, okay, this is a person who has been jerked out of her life of relative affluence and stability when she's 5 years old and put into one of the most deplorable situations a human being could be put into. Her family survives it and ends up, when she's 10 years old, in America. Another new start. This is her third new start. In 1959, she is on one of her father's ships as they're traveling around, and they stop in Havana, Cuba, and a bunch of bearded men come aboard. Now, this is just a few days after the revolution, and Fidel Castro and his band of merry men are boarding the ship. And she asked the tallest of the group who he was, and he replied to her, quote, "Yo soy Cuba. I am Cuba." And this is one of the things Fidel Castro used to say often. He represented Cuba. And so this is her introduction to Fidel Castro. Top right picture there is her as a young girl working with her father. That's her father there as captain of the ship. Top left, obviously, Fidel Castro with the 26th of July banner, which is the movement, the independence movement he called his revolution. Bottom picture is Fidel and his many mistresses. Top right of that photo, who Fidel is turned and looking at the girl over his left shoulder to our right, is Marita Lorenz. So pretty quickly, Marita and Fidel form a bond. There's an attraction there. And of course, Fidel collected women, and she's young and impressionable. There was an instant liking for each other. She took him around and showed him the ship. And while he was being shown around by this lovely young American girl, that's how he views her, he asked for her phone number, and she gave it to him. And a few days later, he calls her, and he says, "I'm sending a private plane." This is how Fidel worked. "And I want you to come to Cuba." So as a father myself, I'm thinking how I would respond in a situation like that. But Marita, to hear her tell it, there was no question in her father's mind. There was no question in her mind. She was going. So she goes to Cuba on this private plane, and they become the closest thing you can say to a couple. I don't know if Fidel would call it a couple, because she was part of his harem, but they began a torrid affair, during which Marita became pregnant. That bottom picture there is Fidel showing a young Marita around, bragging, showing off, driving his Jeep. "I am Cuba. I can do anything I want. You're with me. That makes you special." And she said she felt that way. And if you listen to her tell the story or read her account of that story, she was overwhelmed. She was just absolutely smitten. The magnetism of Fidel Castro, she talks at length about. She talks about his he just had this aura about him. And of course, it's the heady days of the revolution. They just won power, and so there's just a state of euphoria in Cuba, and he represents everyone's hopes and ambitions, and she's close to this guy. So it's pretty heady times for a young 19-year-old girl. This is where her story makes a left turn. Everything's going swimmingly to this point. One day, while she's drinking a glass of milk, she's heavily pregnant by this point, so several months in, obviously, she blacked out and came to a few hours later to find herself seriously ill and no longer pregnant. And according to Marita, she was told at this point that the CIA had captured her and drugged her and induced labor and stolen her baby. And now this is not what she finds out this later. Okay, she initially blames Castro and the people near Castro. She knows she's been drugged. She knows she's no longer pregnant. Where's her baby? And she's going to come to blame the CIA for this, whom she says drugged her before inducing labor and stealing her baby. She was eventually, she became so ill as a result of this circumstance that she was flown home to New York, where she was visited by the CIA. And that's who, and then they told her at this point, I'm kind of reconstructing the story backwards here. That's who told her that Castro had drugged her and arranged for her to be given a late-term abortion. And she didn't know what to believe. You know, she has no relationship with the CIA yet at this point. But it's clear now, looking at it from the outside, looking in, that she's been targeted, and she's an American girl, and the CIA has arranged all of this. And they're telling her that Castro arranged all of this, and they are saving her from him. According to Marita, quote, "I didn't believe it at first, but they did a good job of brainwashing me, telling me that he did this to me. It left me heartbroken." So this is why she comes to blame Castro, because of the story that the CIA tells her. She's kind of just, she wakes up, she doesn't know what happened. All she knows, she's not pregnant anymore. She's sick. They fly her to New York, and these people visit her, whom she doesn't know, and they say, "We saved you from Castro. He drugged you. He took your baby," and that's that. And she didn't want to believe, but she does know that she doesn't have a baby anymore. So they begin this, like she says, this period of brainwashing her, and they begin telling her that Castro was a threat to her personally, but also to America. And over time, she believes them. She said so herself. "I didn't believe it at first, but they did a good job of brainwashing me, telling me that he did this to me. It left me heartbroken." Eventually, when she's been properly prepped in this New York, either a hotel room or a hospital room, I don't know where she was, a safe house possibly, but they've been working on her, brainwashing her. And when she's ready, they tell her, quote, "We want you to take him out." And now you know why they targeted her. We've been having all these problems trying to get close to Castro. But if they could turn somebody he trusts, somebody who can get into his bedroom, anything's possible at that point. And she agreed. She said, "They used me because I was the only one that could get back into his bedroom." So evidently, the mission to kidnap Marita Lorenz was carried out in such a way that Fidel Castro would believe that either it was her family that had come got him or come got her, or family members or somebody from America, whatever, that she would be welcome back if she came back. That, to me, that's the big question that I always have when I hear this story is, well, why would the CIA think that Castro, who's this notoriously paranoid individual and has this vast security apparatus around him, people that are trained to sniff out a rat, why would they think this 19-year-old girl A, would be welcome back after she's been whisked out of the country, and B, that you could trust her with such a mission. She has no training. Nevertheless, uh, this is the story that she is telling. Um, Obviously, she has motivation. That's one of the things you find out quickly as you study these anti-Castro plots. The CIA is exploiting people who they hate Castro too, but you can't go in with E. Howard Hunt just can't arrive on Cuba shores and kill Castro. He would be sniffed out immediately. You have to exploit people that have either a prior relationship with Castro or are Cuban. And there's no shortage of anti-Castro Cubans in Miami and New Orleans and elsewhere in the southern United States. So they're being trained through Operation 40 and Mongoose. Um, and now you have this girl who's jilted, the lover of Fidel Castro, who feels jilted because, according to what they've told her, he killed her baby. That's pretty strong motivation. So at this point, because of that anger, that bitterness that she feels towards Fidel, which is all personally motivated, she joins the anti-Castro movement. And that's when she's introduced to Frank Sturgis. And Frank Sturgis recruits her into an operation to assassinate Castro. That was her purpose in joining the CIA. Maybe she had other, she just thought she was just joining the movement to try to get rid of Castro. But their designs for her all along where she was going to be an asset, and she was expendable. Obviously, as far as the agency was concerned, she was expendable. But if she could carry this off, wow, think about the implications. So Frank Sturgis is introduced to her, and I've got 3 pictures here of Frank Sturgis. Top left, here he is down in the JM station down in Miami, training anti-Castro Cubans. That was his role. Frank Sturgis, by the way, is Cuban. His original name was Frank Fiorini. He changed his name to Sturgis. Top right, Frank Sturgis, pictured there with his wife and his father. And they're in Washington trying to get a legal matter resolved. That's why he's dressed the way he's dressed. He's never dressed that way. Bottom picture, again, training anti-Castro Cubans. The picture with the red circle, that's Frank Sturgis. He actually autographed that picture, as you can see. So Frank Sturgis recruits her into this operation, and the way the operation is supposed to go down is she's going to go back to Cuba and try to rekindle her relationship with Fidel Castro, and at the right time sneak poison into either his food or somehow into his medicine kit or whatever. They're going to give her poison pills, and her job is to maybe put these poison pills in a drink, and if she can rekindle this relationship and get close to him, maybe get back in his bed, this should be easy. But the trick is, can she rekindle that relationship? That, to me, that would be I would think that would be the hard part. Uh, anyway, they reunite. She flies back. They reunite, and sure enough, it's like a long lost love. And I'm sure she had a cover story to tell him. And she ends up back in his bed with him. Um, and she had hidden these poison pills in some cold cream, a little container of cold cream that she had with her. And I'm sure the Fabian Escalante and the security services put her through the paces to make sure she was clean, make sure that she was not a threat to their boss. And after a brief period of time, boy, they're back at it again. And of course, now she's there to kill him. But according to her words, or in her words, she says that after one particularly legendary, that's her words, lovemaking session, she realizes, I can't go through with this. And she, in some pillow talk, reveals to Fidel Castro the real reason she's there. She says, well, uh, whatever she called him, Fidel, lover boy, whatever. She says, I'm here to assassinate you. I'm given some poison pills to assassinate you. I can't do it. I can't go through with it. I love you too much. And I was sent here by the CIA. And of course, now I'm sure he's telling her his side of the story. And throughout all of this, remember now, she is operating under the assumption that she lost her baby. And she's going to find out later that she didn't lose her baby. But that's she's not going to find that out till years later. So Castro's smart. This is something that Castro's good at. You'd think at this point he would have her killed, or he would get rid of her in such a way that you never have to deal with this threat again. But that's not what he does. He turns the, so this is the spy game. When she comes to America, the CIA gets her to go back, and she's working for the CIA. Well, now, this is how he gets all his spies in America. This is one of the reasons why the Bay of Pigs doesn't work. This is one of the reasons why all those 640 some assassination attempts didn't work, because he played the long game, and he would send these people back to America, her in particular, and they would now be loyal to him, or they certainly would be loyal enough to warn him of something was going to happen to him. And so she returns to the United States. And of course, she's returning as a failure. CIA, as far as they're concerned, the operation is a failure. She tells the CIA that the reason it failed was because the cold cream dissolved the pills. Whether that was a story she made up or concocted with Fidel, I don't know. But that's what she told the CIA. She said, I couldn't have gone through with it. I thought that was a great way to hide the pills, but it didn't work. It dissolved the pills. When I went to look for them, they were gone. And that was a way for her to alleviate any responsibility for having failed in the mission. But she's reminded of it time and time again as Operation 40 starts gearing up for Bay of Pigs. And this was made necessary. Operation 40 could have been shut down. Bay of Pigs would have never happened if Marita had carried off her plot or her operation to kill Castro. And she's reminded of this time and time again. And so, and then especially when Bay of Pigs flops the way it does, I'm sure all the folks, Frank Sturgis included, that she's been involved with all these, throughout this Operation 40 training and stuff, remind her, you were there, you had a chance to make all this problem go away, and you didn't succeed. Anyway, so as we proceed forward chronologically, we get through April of 1961 when the Bay of Pigs disaster happens. And at this point, Marita is assigned to collect donations for the anti-communist cause for the former Venezuelan dictator Marcos Perez Jimenez, who is now living in Florida in exile. And as such, becomes his mistress for about 2 years and has a daughter with him. Top right picture of Marita and her daughter Monica. Jimenez is top picture left in the glasses, being escorted into the United States as a political asylum after fleeing from Venezuela. This is the bottom picture, is a picture of him in Venezuela in happier times when he's the dictator there. And now he's living in Florida, and she's been assigned by the CIA to collect donations for the anti-communist cause for him, because the thinking is he's going to go back to Venezuela. CIA is going to help put him back in power. And so she is now involved with another Latin American dictator. Evidently, she cannot say no to these Latin American dictators. Remember now, I'm just giving the backstory here before she gives her testimony at this Liberty Lobby trial, this lawsuit. In 1963, Marita meets one of the Operation 40 members, a man named Lee Harvey Oswald. Top picture here. This is two men. This comes from Marita's own photograph album. She's got a picture top. The left circle is Oswald. The right circle is Sturgis. And they are at Operation 40 training facility. The bottom picture is a little bit widened out. You can still see Oswald far left. You can still see Sturgis wearing that same hat. Second to left, red circle, you see E. Howard Hunt. Third circle from the left, standing there right in the middle, kind of the slightly built individual wearing the sunglasses, the dark sunglasses. And on the far right circle, that is Marita Lorenz. So they're all together. And this is sort of the beginning of the next phase, the phase that's going to matter in this Liberty Lobby lawsuit. This is the next phase of Marita's involvement with Operation 40 and the CIA. According to Marita Lorenz, Lee Harvey Oswald was secretly recruiting about 30 anti-Castro Cubans and their American advisors to an assassin squad. She claimed that the group was conspiring to kill Castro and President Kennedy. This is after the Bay of Pigs, and these anti-Castros, they call them anti-Castorites, are furious with Kennedy. They blame him for the Bay of Pigs and the fiasco that it became. And she said that Oswald visited this Operation 40 training camp down in the Everglades, which was overseen by E. Howard Hunt. So that's why you see E. Howard Hunt there. Frank Sturgis oversaw another one of these training camps at another location in Florida, but he is there participating in this event. And so that's the reason for these photographs. They're all together at this Operation 40 training camp in Florida Everglades. So this is her first introduction to Lee Harvey Oswald. According to Marita, I'll move my picture here a little bit. Oh, having problems with this. There we go. According to Marita, Oswald, along with Sturgis and a few other Cuban exile leaders, including Orlando Bosch, pictured top right. Bosch always wears those very distinct glasses. And Pedro Diaz Lanz, pictured bottom left on the left-hand side. I'm sorry, on the right-hand side with the white shirt. Okay, these individuals went to Miami, and Marita was there, and they had a meeting. And at this meeting, they were going to they planned to take a trip to Dallas. And at this meeting, according to Marita, the men, Frank Sturgis, Bosch, Lanz, spread Dallas street maps out on the table. And they were studying these street maps. And she said that we left for Dallas in 2 cars soon after the meeting. They took turns driving, and the 1,300-mile trip took about 2 days. So this is in 1963. This is, you'll see the date here in just a second. This is why this is significant. According to Marita, She, Sturgis, and the others traveled from Miami to Dallas in November 1963 to deliver weapons for an operation. And when they got to Miami, or when they got to Dallas, she and Sturgis went to a Dallas motel room. And when they went into the motel room, E. Howard Hunt was there. Now, none of this is out of the ordinary for her. This is just another mission. E. Howard Hunt, she's already been introduced to at the Everglades. Sturgis recruited her into this program. They had a couple cars and the trunks full of weapons. That was their job, to drive these weapons. They were essentially running guns from Miami to Dallas for an operation. While they were at the hotel room, and she said that E. Howard Hunt was actually paying Sturgis. Yeah, she watched. This is one of the times she watched Hunt pay Sturgis for the weapons. They got a knock on the door. When they opened the door, Jack Ruby was standing there. About an hour later, and he came into the room. And she remembers this particularly. If you hear her tell the story, she says Jack Ruby, when he saw her, was furious with Hunt. Said, "Who's this broad? Basically, what's she doing here? Who is she? How do we know her? Can we trust her?" And Hunt and Sturgis had to vouch for Marita Lorenz. She's with us. She's one of us. She's involved. Don't worry. You can trust her. And she actually stepped outside the hotel room while they argued about her and whether or not she could be trusted. They trusted her. It was Jack Ruby who did. So she remembers that little interaction. According to her, all of these events occurred on November 21st, 1963, the day before the assassination. Top right is a recounting of this same story by Marita Lorenz. And bottom right is a picture of E. Howard Hunt during his Watergate heyday. Testimony there. She continues with her testimony. This is the story she's telling at the Liberty Lobby appeal. She's the star witness. She's telling the story about this her background, and then how she got roped into the CIA, how she got pulled into the assassination plot by Frank Sturgis, how she met several players like Sturgis, E. Howard Hunt, and at the Everglades training camp, how she went to Miami. They got recruited to this gun running operation. They go from Miami to Dallas, traveling all this distance. They get to the hotel room. E. Howard Hunt pays Sturgis. Sturgis and Hunt argue with Ruby about her. And so now she's brought us up to November 21st. On November 22nd, she says she left Dallas. She said, "I knew this was different from the other job." This is right from the trial transcript. She goes, "I knew this was different from the other jobs. This was not just gun running. This was big, very big, and I wanted to get out. I told Sturgis I wanted to leave. He said it was a very big operation, but that my part was not dangerous. I was to be a decoy." Before he could go further, I said, "Please let me get out. I want to go back to my baby in Miami." Of course, we know she's had a baby with the Venezuelan dictator, her little daughter, Monica. Finally, he agrees. He drove me to the airport. So this is her testimony about November 22nd. And she says that this story, when they asked her, "Have you told anybody else this story?" She says, "Yeah, I told the FBI after the assassination, everything I'm telling you." And the FBI didn't want to know because, quote, "those were CIA activities, not FBI." So this is another layer of deception that the FBI was involved in with regards to evidence that never made it to the Warren Commission. Remember, the FBI is the clearinghouse for all information, all evidence that's going to the Warren Commission. The Marita Lorenz story never reaches the Warren Commission because the FBI didn't let it. And they didn't want to know Marita's story. She came forward, told them a story that absolutely would be crucial knowledge to know the day before the assassination. all these people were congregating in a Dallas motel room with weapons. Payments were being made, and they're all CIA related, which really, when you realize that Jack Ruby was there at this meeting, it really makes you question Jack Ruby. We know he has mob ties, even though the Warren Commission tried hard to dispel that. Now it appears that he has CIA ties as well. And boy, that expands everything. But of course, the FBI does not follow through with any of this, since the Warren Commission never hears of any of this. And so, she's not the investigator. She did her part. She told the story. And then when nobody followed up on it, she's like, well, I guess it doesn't really matter. Regarding this operation itself, according to Marita Lorenz, Sturgis later told her, quote, "We killed the president that day. You could have been a part of it, part of history. You should have stayed. It was safe. Everything was covered in advance. No arrests, no real newspaper investigation. It was all covered. Very professional." This is a picture here of Frank Fiorini. He's still going by Fiorini at this point. And Che Guevara. This is back when Frank Fiorini is helping the Castro in the revolution before he has a falling out and moves to America and becomes part of the anti-Castro CIA, the assassin, Frank Sturgis. So Sturgis is essentially confessing to Marita Lorenz that he was involved. The people that you saw in that hotel room, we killed the president that day. And this is in a subsequent phone conversation that he has with Marita Lorenz after she'd gone back to Miami. And later they have this conversation. Of course, we now know that E. Howard Hunt is going to later confess to all of this. Okay, he denies it for years and years and years, but he later confesses to this. But February 7th, 1985, for the purposes of this Liberty Lobby lawsuit, this appeal, the jury reverses the verdict. It says, quote, "We, the jury, find for the defendant, Liberty Lobby, and against the plaintiff, E. Howard Hunt," canceling out the big settlement that he'd won, and essentially saying that Liberty Lobby and this article that had written accusing E. Howard Hunt of being involved in the conspiracy to kill JFK was correct in what they said. It was not libel. It was not defamatory. It was correct. It's true. Leslie Armstrong, the jury foreperson, when questioned later by the media, said, quote, "The evidence clearly demonstrated that Hunt and the CIA assassinated President Kennedy." Now, as I said, Hunt is going to almost go to his grave denying it. But in 2007, on his deathbed, he summons his son and a reporter. They transcribe and tape record his statement. That's what he wrote out on that little 3x5 index card, the flow chart, putting LBJ at the top, who signed off on it, Bill Harvey, Cord Meyer, and David Morales, and the fatal shot came from the grassy knoll, et cetera, et cetera. E. Howard Hunt confesses right before he dies. So that is corroboration of Marita Lorenz's story, because he's, E. Howard Hunt confessed. And of course, there's other corroboration. Marita Lorenz's story is just a fantastic story. I have questions. I would love to sit down with Marita and ask, okay, how did you win back Fidel, his trust, when you went back to Cuba, end up sleeping with him? He knows you've been in America. Now all of a sudden you reappear. I'd like to know how that all worked out. Another question I might have is, when you did find out later that your son was alive, that baby that she lost, turns out he was born and he was raised in Cuba. Fidel raised him as one of his own sons, because he was a son. And when she met him, he was a teenager. And how did that go? Now who's telling the truth? Was it Fidel's people who drugged you and induced the labor of the kid because they ended up with the kid? Was it the CIA who did it? Who did all that? How do you reconcile all that now? That would be a question that I would have. Nevertheless, her story has been picked and picked and picked apart, and it has been corroborated so many different ways. Obviously, Frank Sturgis corroborated it. He later comes out and says, "Yeah, I know Marita Lorenz. I don't know about all these details, but we were involved in Operation 40 together." And grudgingly admitted to a lot of the details Marita Lorenz described. E. Howard Hunt corroborated the story as far as the players involved and that the CIA was involved and he was involved in the plot to kill the president. So just a crazy story, but the jury believed her. She was cross-examined and the jury believed her enough to reverse the verdict. And the jury foreperson came out and named names. So now the consequence of this trial is that not only is the Liberty Lobby, the Spotlight magazine article naming E. Howard Hunt as the conspirator, now the jury foreperson in an official legal proceeding has named E. Howard Hunt and the CIA. They've widened it. And there's some evidence. This is part of what we call a limited hangout position. The CIA knew by this point in time that E. Howard Hunt was a loose end and that he was fixing to die anyway. And there were too many corroborations that he was involved. And so they were willing to admit that E. Howard Hunt, as a rogue CIA agent, was involved in the assassination plot to kill the president, but not the agency itself. And so they sort of threw him under the bus. And there's some speculation that that's the reason E. Howard Hunt finally, in his deathbed confession, went public and said what he said, to say, no, it wasn't just me. It was people above me. It was agency. It was the CIA. So they get into this little spat right before E. Howard Hunt dies, where the CIA says, yeah, it was E. Howard Hunt. We're willing to concede that. He says, no. It was much bigger than that. And I didn't do anything independent of you. I was CIA and I didn't make up my own orders. So anyway, that's the story of Marita Lorenz and her involvement first in a sexual relationship, an emotional relation, a love relationship with Fidel Castro, then in an assassination attempt against Castro, and then in an assassination attempt against JFK, which succeeded. You talk about a woman who was privy to a lot of important history, a lot of very important history. So that's the sixth investigation. And tomorrow we're going to look at where we stand at this point. After 6 investigations, where do we stand? What have we learned? Where can we go from here? What can we what direction can we begin to look as far as who the actual conspirators were? I think first I want to talk about why I believe it's a conspiracy. So we'll get into that as well the next day. But then we'll get into naming the conspirators themselves. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the story of Marita Lorenz, and look her up. She's got a book. There's a lot of information out there about her. Her story is widely known now. But the reason I started off today asking why don't we know very much about her is because the average person, when you talk about the JFK assassination, you bring up the name Marita Lorenz, don't know anything about her, never heard of her. I hadn't heard of her for a long time. And yet her story is really key. It's an important piece of the puzzle, putting together this plot. And it's her version of it, but she has no reason to lie. And in a situation where she, under threat of perjury, under penalty of perjury, under oath, she told her story. It's one of the few times somebody involved in this JFK conspiracy and all the goings on related to JFK actually went on the record under oath. You have to give her some credit for that, because a lot of these other people who are given all this credibility, they're saying, so maybe they're saying it in under oath in a classified hearing. She did it in public. And a lot of people gave testimony when they weren't under oath, and their stories changed. Marita Lorenz's story has been the same from beginning to end. And so anyway, check out her book. It's pretty fascinating. There's other people who have written about her. Just look her, Google her name, and all kinds of information pops up. So check out my website, sphistory.com, if you're interested in any of my other content. Also, thanks for watching, and hit the notification bell, hit the thumbs up if you like what you've watched or seen or heard, and feel free to join the channel. It's free, and you'll be notified anytime new content drops. I usually try to drop content every morning, 6 days a week, and sometimes the schedule changes. But anyway, if you hit the notification bell, you'll be notified anytime content is fixing to drop. Until next time, this is episode 65. Tomorrow we'll do episode 66. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you. Thanks for watching. Bye.